Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, Understanding the Qur'an. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In this series, we have been looking at Surah Al Kahf, the 18th chapter of the Qur'an, known as the chapter of the cave. And in the previous verses, we have been looking at the description of the people of the cave, those youths who sought to protect their faith, having spoken out against the idolatrous practices of the society, which wanted them to abide by their idolatry and to worship other than Allah. They spoke out against it, and Allah gave them protection, directed them to a cave, and put them to sleep. And in the previous verse, Allah begins to describe what they look like in that state, having explained that the sunlight didn't come directly in the cave. He then goes on in the 18th verse to describe how they were, and what they look like. In the previous, he described the cave itself and where they were in the cave. In verse 18, Allah there says,
وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ أَيْقَاظًا وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ وَنُقَلِّبُهُمْ ذَاتَ الْيَمِينِ وَذَاتَ الشِّمَالِ وَكَلْبُهُمْ بَاسِطٌ ذِرَاعَيْهِ بِالْوَصِيدِ لو اطلعت عليهم لوليت منهم فرارا ولملئت منهم رعبا.
You would have thought them awake, though they were asleep. I turned them on their right sides and on their left, and their dog stretched out its forelegs at the entrance of the cave. Had you seen them, you would have turned and fled, filled with fear. In this verse, Allah describes, as I said, the sleepers themselves in their state. We spoke about the sunlight coming into the cave. Not only that, Allah says here that if you saw them in the cave, you would have thought them as awake, not sleeping, though they were fast asleep. Why? Because Allah had their bodies move. He had their bodies shift, turning over onto their right sides, then turning the bodies over onto the left sides. What is the significance of this? Again, this goes back to science. We know that if a person lies in a position constantly without movement, then they develop what are known as bed sores. We know this in hospitals. Nurses, doctors are very careful about this, because a person, by staying in one position all the time, lying in one position, or then the pressure of whatever you're lying on to that area of your body that is in the closest contact, it reduces the circulation in that area. So eventually that area goes into decay. Can cause the flesh there to start to rot eventually if you lie there long enough. So the medical profession, the nurses will come and shift you, turn you over to your right side, then turn you over to your left side, from time to time, onto your back, then onto your right, then onto your left. They constantly have to do this. Anybody who is bedridden, we know this. This is a reality, needed. Well, Allah describes those in the cave as being turned by Allah. Through the agency of the angels, whatever, they were turned. So you observing that, if you'd come to the mouth of the cave and looked in and saw them, you would have fled in fear and awe. Because here they were moving. They were asleep, yet their bodies were moving. And the dog was sitting near the entrance of the cave, as if guarding the cave, while asleep, with its front legs, forelegs, stretched out, just as the dog when it sits in that guarding position, head up. And so Allah had the dog go to sleep like that, because the dog was with them. This is something part of the miracle of Allah. Had we seen that, it would have been something shocking for us, Allah says. One could note here that Allah speaks of the dog being with them. Traditionally, Muslims are perceived as despising dogs, not wanting to have anything to do with dogs. You know, Muslims see them running from dogs whenever dogs show up. But the reality is that Islam is not opposed to dogs. It's a mistaken idea. What the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said was that if a dog eats or drinks from the vessel in which you're eating and drinking, you should pour it out, let the dog finish eating it, and then clean it 7 times. One of the times you should use clean earth. Clean earth is known. Earth is known to contain, organisms, bacteria, which have a powerful cleansing effect. Most of your antibiotics are taken from the earth. So this is the requirement, to protect human beings from harm which may be transmitted by the dogs. And there are a variety of different diseases which science already has identified as being passed on by dogs, but there are so many more that we don't know about. Allah knows, revealed to us in time to come. At any rate, Muslims are permitted to keep dogs in certain circumstances. The Prophet ﷺ didn't like us to keep dogs in the home. He said, relating that this is from Allah, that the angels of mercy, will not enter homes in which there are pictures hanging pictures, or there are dogs. So the dogs should not be kept in that close circumstance within the home. However, we are permitted to have dogs which are guard dogs, guarding our homes, dogs which are sheep dogs, cattle dogs, dogs which help in the herding of sheep, cattle, camels, goats, whatever. Hunting dogs, where you go hunting, you shoot the animal and the dog goes, picks it up, the bird, whatever. In these circumstances, these dogs are permissible. Also, a person who's blind who uses a dog, a seeing eye dog, to guide them. These are perfectly acceptable. And some Muslims have gone to an extreme where they feel that if a dog just brushes against them, their state of ablution is lost. If they were in a state of wudu or ablution, ritual purification, then that's lost. They have to go and redo it again. Perhaps the area, the garment, whatever that's been touched, they have to go and wash that 7 times. They want to use earth. This is mistaken. This has nothing to do with the garments we wear. The saliva of the dog itself, if it comes on us, it's just enough to wash it off. If it goes in the vessel we're going to eat from, where we're now from, that is going to be transferred into our system, this is where it becomes important to clean it thoroughly. But if a dog touches us, or we touch it, etc., this does not break our state of ablution. We should be aware of this, because the things which cancel or nullify the state of ritual purity, known as ablution, or wudu, or tahara, this is done by specified actions, which the Prophet ﷺ left no doubt about. Whether one urinates, defecates, passes wind, In the case of women, if they menstruate, men and women, if they have sexual relations. These are the specific times. And if a person goes to sleep, because of the fact that in the time of sleep, then it's possible to pass wind without being aware of it. So sleep also is a situation which will cause one to have to renew one's ablution. So outside of those things, touching of a dog or a dog touching us does not break that state of ablution. So we have Allah mentioning the sleepers having along with them a dog. And in the next 2 verses, we find Allah describing what happened when they woke up. Allah says,
وكذلك بعثناهم ليتساءلوا بينهم قال قائل منهم كم لبثتم قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم قالوا ربكم أعلم بما لبثتم فابعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف ولا يشعرن بكم أحدا وكذلك بعثناهم ليتساءلوا بينهم قال قائل منهم كم لبثتم قالوا لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم قالوا ربكم أعلم بما لبثتم فابعثوا أحدكم بورقكم هذه إلى المدينة فلينظر أيها أزكى طعاما فليأتكم برزق منه وليتلطف ولا يشعرن بكم أحدا.
And in that way I raised them up again so that they would question each other. One of them asked, "How long have you spent here?" The others answered, "Maybe we have spent a day or a part of a day." And they declared, "Your Lord knows best how long you have spent. So let us send one of us with this silver money to the city to look for a place with the best food, in order to bring something to eat. He should, however, be cautious and not let anyone be aware of us." And in verse 20, Allah completes the thought of what they said to each other when they woke up, saying,
إنهم إن يظهروا عليكم يرجموكم أو يعيدوكم في ملتهم ولن تفلحوا إذن أبدا.
For if they succeed in overpowering you, they would stone you to death or force you back to their belief, in which case you would never obtain true success. So in these two verses, verses 19 and 20, we find Allah describing that He woke them up in that way, in that same miraculous way, in the same way that He miraculously put them to sleep, He miraculously caused them to awaken. Nothing externally caused them. He woke them up. And He explained that they would question each other, that there would be some lesson to be learned from all of this. Of course, He could have had them die and raise them up on the Day of Judgment. They were righteous people and give them paradise. But Allah brought them back in this life to reaffirm His greatness, His support to the believers, to be a sign for those who would find out about this, because Allah set in motion things which would cause them to reveal themselves and the people would know about it. Anyway, Allah woke them up, and then one of them asked the other, how long have we spent here? Naturally, if you've been sleeping, people wake up, they're going to ask, how long have we been here now? And the others responded, maybe a day or a part of a day. Time had passed. What turns out, as we will see, to be hundreds of years had passed. They awoke and thought they were only sleeping for a day or a part of a day. That's how life will appear to those who enter that state. People who wake up from a coma. When they wake up, they're not conscious of the time that has passed, whether they've been in a coma for 2 years or 6 months or a week. For them, time stops. virtually stops. They're not aware of the passage of time. So when they come back out of it, as the sleepers when they awoke, it will seem as though they were only sleeping for a day or a part of a day. And it's interesting to note that when Allah describes the people of the hellfire, those people, when they're resurrected and they have been judged, right? When they're resurrected in the process of the resurrection and judgment, they will turn to each other and question, or they will be asked, how long were you on the earth? And they will say, a day or a part of a day. They will look back at this life, though they weren't sleeping through the life, but the passage of that life will be so short that it will appear to them to be like only a day or a part of a day. It's interesting comparison. Allah uses the same phrase to describe the statements of these who slept for hundreds of years and those coming up for the judgment and for hell, questioning about time spent on the earth. People in general questioning, how long will we spent? When we are asked, it will, this whole life that we pass, whether it is 70 years, 90 years, 50 years, or 20 years, this whole life, which seems so long in its passage as we live it, will seem to have been like only a day or part of a day. And this is the reality. If we look back right now in our lives, we think back from the time we were as young as we could think. What time could we remember? When we were 5 years old, 6 years old, whatever. And we think back, I was 6 then, and now I am whatever I am. This time has passed, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 50 years has passed. Do we feel those 50, 10, 20, 30 years? Do we feel those years? Can we, can we, as we lived it, it seemed each year is just taking time to pass, time is, but when we look back, it doesn't seem, it seems like only yesterday. Time has passed. We're not really conscious of the passage of time. So much so that some philosophers, scientists question, is there really time? What is time? What is time? We have clocks ticking and we measure it this way, etc. But we're not really conscious of time. Some have put up a variety of incredible theories about time. And a number of them have flatly said it doesn't exist. At any rate, this life will seem like only the passing of a day or part of a day. There is no coming back. When we die, there's no reincarnation, as some, the Hindus, Buddhists, and others, even some Christians, have accepted this kind of idea, that we come back into this life and you work things out. If you were bad in this one life that you had, when you come back, you're going to have to suffer in that next life. Your karma will catch up with you. You have to pay for it. This was invented to explain people suffering where there seemed to be no reason or rhyme, no cause. Why? Why is that baby? Why is that person who was a good person? Why are they suffering? It must have been a previous life. Well, we don't have to go there. Revelation doesn't teach that. This is something invented by people. No. What is happening around us, what we may perceive as harm and suffering, etc., we don't know the ultimate consequences. These are tests for us, for those individuals who suffer it. The child is not held accountable. What it appears to suffer, whenever we suffer in any case, it is purification. But for the child, for example, he has not committed any crime. What is the purification of? This life is a brief life. It's not held accountable. It will be brought back to live out a full life. To live to maturity, to have the choice between right and wrong. It's not reincarnation in the sense of this constant cycle, but the Prophet ﷺ had explained that those who didn't receive the message of Islam, those who were insane, those who died in childhood, etc., before the final resurrection and judgment, they will be brought back. And a prophet will be sent to them. calling them to the worship of the one God. In truth, if they follow him, they will go on to paradise. If they reject him, then they go to hell. So that is all taken into account. When we die, it's one way. Those of us that are conscious, aware, we've received the message, we have our sense about it, etc. There's no coming back into this life. You die, that is it. And we have to answer on the day of judgment. Now, after this explanation, where Allah mentioned that he brought them back again, that they would question, and they would come to the conclusion that maybe they only spent a day or part of a day, and they mentioned themselves, amongst themselves, that really Allah knows best. Allah knows best how long we've spent. That's the reality. And they decided to send one of them into the town to go and get some food. They were hungry. They awoke. They were hungry. One of them was sent in with the silver money which they had to go and buy food. And they were instructed to be cautious, to be careful, lest, so that the people would not find out about them. Now, this is something which is part of Islamic teachings, that we take caution. Though everything ultimately is in Allah's hands, when we're doing things, we should see possible harm, etc., which can come from it, and we try to avoid it. We don't just say, I trust in God, and I just go ahead without taking any kind of precautions and trying to do what is, according to the principles that we can see around us, where possible harm can come. But actually, in the seeds of these events, their discovery would be necessary. It was going to happen because they were bringing with them coins which were from hundreds of years before. When they tried to purchase anything with these coins, it's going to expose them. They're going to be asked, where did this come from? They say, it's our money. What do you mean your money? We stopped using this money hundreds of years ago. They're going to be spotted. Their clothing, the way in which they dress, changes had taken place. And they would be found out. Allah said that so that they would be found out. Though they are trying to avoid being found out, they would be found out, and this would make the people aware of this miracle of Allah. With that, dear viewers, we'll stop here, and we will continue in our coming program with this verse, because it's not complete as yet. With that, dear viewers, I'd like to thank you for being with us in this segment of our program, Understanding the Qur'an, in which we have been looking at verses from Surah Al Kahf. We'd like to bid you farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.